Welcome to our weekly market review brought to you by ETM Analytics and Treasury One. I'm joined by Treasury One's currency strategist, Andre Celia. Andre, someone flipped the risk on switch this weekend, and it's been very interesting developments obviously coming out of the Middle East as Israel stepped up their campaign, and then the US now finally getting involved directly in the conflict between Israel and Iran, obviously causing a lot of uncertainty, not just because of another conflict that's come about, but because we simply do not know how Iran is going to respond, how other global powers might respond. There's so many scenarios on the table that this could go any direction really, that it's causing a lot of uncertainty, and who knows.
Ilse Marie, yesterday, interesting. You mentioned the uncertainty surrounding Iran, but I also read on Thursday and Friday that Donald Trump said, he will decide within the next 2 weeks. It was the shortest 2 weeks in my life, because at the same time that was said, the airplanes basically started up and loaded the bombs. So what will be the reaction? I can hardly think that there will be no reaction at all. From what I've read is that the foreign ministry from Iran is already on their way to have a word with Vladimir Putin. So there's other role players. There's Pakistan, there's China, there's Russia. They are allies of Iran. And so this is the geopolitical tensions is just heightened all the time. And as I say, I cannot think that Iran will not do anything.
Yes.
Then there's the possibility of closing the most widely used passage for the transport of oil. So it's not just a war. It is what's the impact of this war on the world economy. And there's a product being supplied to the world, and you call it oil, from that region, a product that is widely used by all countries throughout the world and has an impact directly on their economies, on pricing, etc. So this is the tensions here is alarming, and the reactions is even more alarming because we have absolutely no idea how this could play out and at what point could further reaction be triggered.
So I do agree with you. I don't think Iran is not going to do anything, but I do not see them heading to the negotiation table for a peace deal. I don't think if they do, it's not a peace deal, it's surrender, because they are the back foot. So I agree with you there. I think there's still some developments with that regard from Israel's side. Benjamin Netanyahu, I didn't see any indication that he's going to take his foot off the gas. I'm seeing that he's going to push through. I think they are ultimately looking for some form of regime change in Iran. And of course, like you said, we don't know how the other operations in other countries and strategic alliances of Iran, how they're going to consider this. You mentioned that he is currently in Moscow, the Iranian foreign minister, and there could be some cooperation there, but to what extent, if at all, it is very uncertain. And you mentioned, and we see it now, the Strait of Hormuz. There's the Iranian parliament has now agreed to close the Strait of Hormuz, but it's not that simple. It's very important to remember this. It's never been closed, for one. B, it's not as simple as Iran just closing that strait. They're part of a treaty. Some of the waters belong to some of their neighboring countries. So they can't just go out and close the Strait of Hormuz, right? Above from that, they will be, if they do somehow militarily close the strait, they'll be cutting their nose to spite their face, because it's their oil, from their oil revenues, that they can rebuild and refund whatever they decide to do, if they do decide to do something. They will be harming two of their biggest allies, including China. I know they're not China's biggest oil provider, but they are certainly a significant one. I think it's between 40 and 80% of Iran's oil goes to China. And Oman in the region. Oman also uses that. So, to me, it's unlikely that they will go ahead and just close the Strait of Hormuz for various reasons. And if you want the unwanted attention from the world and global markets on you, then you close that strait, because that is going to spike oil and gas prices. And then, of course, like you mentioned, it's the secondary impacts that we're seeing playing out in oil markets. There's a spike, but there was also a very significant spike in freight prices in that region. I think northward of 180%. In freight prices traveling through that region. We're seeing, a lot of flights being cancelled, which means less tourists in some of those areas. So these indirect impacts from this conflict is starting to take shape in this region. And but the one thing, of course, is no one knows exactly where this is going, and hopefully we will have some clarity in the coming days. I mean, you mentioned now it's moving so quickly. It's so fluid, the situation. We should perhaps even have a clearer direction towards the end of this week. So, it's still a very interesting time. And obviously it doesn't come at a great time for central banks who's looking to move down on interest rates, hoping that inflation will come down. We were concerned about the tariffs, and now we've got a new one. And we'll see inflation expectations, I'm sure, this week also coming out from the US, right? And the PCE. Will that reflect it by now, or is it still too early?
I think it's still too early for any of the current happenings in the world, geopolitically speaking, to have an impact on inflation at this point in time. The graph is just an interesting one. If we look at the graph, then, spot where the inflation problems is arising. It's arising mostly in the US and in Japan, so this simply says one thing to me: with the uncertainty that started unfolding over the weekend, there is not a snowball's chance in hell that Mr. Powell and his team will move on interest rates at this point in time, with the possibility of inflation going up even further if there's an oil situation, and where it's currently going. In any case, let's just rule that out, that Mr. Powell will at this point in time change his policy on interest rates. What is a further problem here is, of course, that if you have inflation rising and you have growth slowing, well, then you have a fantastic stagflation situation, and that undermines dollar support, So once again, uncertainty unfolding, but we also know that in great uncertain times, people might abandon all these things and say the dollar still seems to be the nicest place to be, and put your money because it's safer than any other place. So that could underpin the dollar again. So I've listened to what you also said, and we can say whatever we want to. There's only one word that describes everything, and that's uncertainty. No investor likes that. No consumer likes that. And they all go into, if I can term it in this way, hiding. And that's got a direct hit on the economy and the expected growth on economies worldwide. So this will definitely put a damper on that at this point in time.
And this uncertainty, is our currency here down in the south reflecting the impact that's going on?
Well, the risks is starting to weigh on the negative side for possible weakening of the rand against the dollar, simply because of this uncertainty, heightened risks, a risk-off scenario that could unfold, and it places, we know that normally places pressure on the rand from a weakening point of view. So I voiced my concern last week already. You were not here, but I voiced my concern that everything's not played out as yet, and that I am concerned that this calm that there is could soon and very sudden disappear and lead to a bit of a weakening of the rand. So I'm still voicing my concerns, but for the moment it's in this, call it 1775, 1875 trading range. But I think for this point in time, chances are, as I say, that there could be a bit of a spike, but I don't think it will last forever. But then we have no idea how long this tension in the Middle East will continue.
Well, uncertainty is the name of the game this week, but who knows? Things can change on a whim. Andre, then we will catch up again next week, Monday. Thank you so much for your insights.